Special counsel Jack Smith appears to be in the final stretch of his investigations into former President Donald Trump. Smith has been looking into the possible mishandling of classified documents and efforts to obstruct the 2020 election. Now, a notable development this week, Tim Parlatore, one of Donald Trump's key attorneys, announced he is leaving the team. Now, in addition to working on the January 6th investigation, he also played a key role in the Mar-a-Lago documents probe, including organizing additional searches at Trump Tower, Bedminster, and an office in Palm Beach, as well as a Florida storage unit. Parlatore also appeared before the grand jury for several hours back in December.
So, as I said at the time, it had nothing to do with the case itself for the client. The real reason is because there are certain individuals that made defending the president.
This just crossed from bad to catastrophic. Not a setback, not a delay, a collapse. What you're watching right now is a presidency unraveling in real time. And it didn't happen because of an election, or a court ruling, or a leak. It happened because the people closest to Donald Trump finally walked away. Here's what just happened, and why it matters far more than most people realize. Late at night, quietly, without a press conference or a spin operation, Donald Trump's lead attorneys walked out. Not after losing a motion, not after a bad hearing. They quit in the middle of the most dangerous legal moment of his presidency. They filed emergency withdrawal papers and left him standing alone in federal court, hours before a critical deadline that could determine whether he faces additional charges, sanctions, or worse. This is not routine. This is not normal. This is a 5-alarm signal that something inside Trump's legal defense has broken beyond repair. Let me explain why this matters. High-level defense attorneys do not abandon a sitting president lightly. These are not interns. These are not political appointees. These are experienced lawyers who understand power, pressure, and proximity to history. They know the stakes, they know the consequences, and they still chose to walk. That decision tells you more than any press release ever could. Because lawyers don't quit when a case is hard. They quit when a case becomes impossible. When the evidence is overwhelming. When the client refuses to listen. When ethical lines are being crossed. When continuing representation puts their own careers, licenses, and freedom at risk. And that's exactly what this looks like. The timing alone is staggering. This happened just days before a court-ordered deadline requiring Trump to produce a massive volume of material connected to the classified documents investigation. We're talking about one of the most sensitive legal matters any former or current president has ever faced. Mishandling classified information, obstruction, defiance of subpoenas, a pattern that prosecutors have already described as deliberate and sustained. And suddenly, the legal team responsible for navigating that minefield is gone. No transition, no handoff, no replacement ready. That doesn't happen by accident. Here's where it gets disturbing. Multiple reports indicate that this wasn't a polite disagreement. It wasn't a scheduling conflict. It was a rupture. Trump, according to people familiar with the situation, demanded strategies that his lawyers could not ethically pursue. He wanted fights they could not win, delays that courts would not tolerate, arguments that were not supported by the facts or the law. And when lawyers say no, when they explain limits, when they do their jobs, Trump does what he always does. He escalates, he pressures, he lashes out, he threatens, he turns representation into intimidation. At some point, even the most hardened legal professionals reach a line they will not cross. That line appears to have been crossed. This is not an isolated moment. This fits a pattern that has followed Trump for years. Attorney after attorney cycling through his orbit. Law firms distancing themselves, counsel withdrawing, others quietly declining to take his calls at all. The reason is simple. Representing Donald Trump has become toxic, not politically, legally, because Trump doesn't just want defense. He wants loyalty. He wants obedience. He wants lawyers who behave like fixers. And the American legal system does not work that way, at least not if you plan to keep your license. Now layer in the financial reality. Defending Trump has cost staggering amounts of money, tens of millions, possibly more than 100 million when you account for all jurisdictions, all motions, all appeals, all investigations running simultaneously. This isn't one case, it's a legal hydra. Federal cases, state cases, civil cases, criminal exposure in multiple venues. And here's the inconvenient truth. Cash matters. Law firms do not operate on slogans. They operate on invoices. When clients stop paying, representation stops. When bills pile up, patience evaporates. When a client becomes both unpayable and unmanageable, firms exit. Trump's wealth has always been more myth than liquidity. Properties tied up, valuations disputed, assets leveraged, and now judgments and penalties looming. This isn't just a legal crisis, it's a cash flow crisis. And when money tightens, options disappear. That brings us to the political fallout, which is accelerating fast. As this legal implosion unfolds, lawmakers are watching closely, and the tone is shifting. What once might have been whispered behind closed doors is now being said out loud. Trump erupts as lawmakers call for his resignation, not because they suddenly found courage, but because the risk calculation has changed. When a president looks stable, party loyalty holds. When a president looks endangered, the exits appear. Members of Congress understand something fundamental. A president who cannot manage his own legal defense cannot manage the executive branch. A president who is at war with his own lawyers is not focused on governing. A president drowning in subpoenas, deadlines, and court orders becomes a liability, not an asset. And that's before we even get to the constitutional implications. Because this isn't just about attorneys quitting, it's about what comes next. Without experienced counsel, Trump faces judges who will not tolerate chaos. Courts do not pause because a defendant alienated his lawyers. Deadlines do not move because a client created his own crisis. If documents are late, sanctions follow. If orders are violated, contempt becomes real. And judges have broad authority: fines, restrictions, adverse rulings. In extreme cases, custody. The legal system does not care about bravado, it cares about compliance. Now zoom out. This legal collapse is happening while Trump is already under extraordinary pressure. Investigations into election interference, financial misconduct, classified materials, attempts to obstruct justice. Each one serious on its own. Together, unprecedented. Add to that a presidency struggling to maintain legitimacy, approval ratings underwater, allies hedging, donors nervous, staff turnover high, public confidence eroding, and then this. The image of a president whose own lawyers walked away. That image is devastating, not because of optics, but because of what it signals to everyone watching. Prosecutors, judges, lawmakers, voters, foreign leaders, allies, adversaries. It signals weakness, and authoritarian figures despise weakness because it invites pressure. Here's the escalation point. As this story breaks, Trump's response has been predictable and dangerous. Rage, blame, attacks, claims of betrayal, public outbursts that do nothing to stabilize the situation, and everything to confirm the concerns that drove his lawyers away in the first place. This is not strategic. This is not controlled. This is a complete meltdown, and it's happening at the worst possible time, because the legal system is now moving forward without the buffer Trump relied on. No trusted intermediaries, no seasoned advocates to de-escalate, no one left to tell him no and be listened to. That's when mistakes multiply. That's when lines get crossed. That's when prosecutors smell blood. The broader danger here is not just Trump's fate, it's the precedent. A sitting president openly unable to mount a coherent legal defense while under investigation for crimes connected to the abuse of power. A president who treats the justice system as an enemy rather than an institution. A president whose conduct pushes professionals to abandon him rather than be complicit. That erodes trust. Not in Trump, in governance itself. And this is why democracy experts are alarmed. Because when leaders frame accountability as persecution and law as betrayal and lawyers as enemies, the system starts to crack, not all at once, slowly, then suddenly. We are approaching the suddenly phase. The next steps matter enormously. Courts will not wait. Congress will not ignore this. Investigators will not slow down out of sympathy. If anything, the absence of competent counsel accelerates exposure. Trump's legal vulnerability is now a national vulnerability, and history is watching. This moment will be studied, not as a footnote, but as a turning point. The point where bravado ran out, where bluster met reality, where the mythology of invincibility finally collapsed under the weight of facts, law, and consequence. This is not about politics anymore. It's about accountability. It's about whether the system holds when tested by someone determined to break it. And the system just got a lot closer to answering that question. Stay informed, stay sharp. For real, unfiltered updates like this, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay connected.